He was called to follow a man who killed his fellow soldier. The killer thought he was untouchable, not knowing how this genius soldier will trace him down. Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me. The story kicks off in a New Zealand harbor in 1903, where Major Pritchard Carroll is having his breakfast while going over the day's list of ships due to dock. He notices a name that catches his eye, Arjun Van Diemen, and immediately tells his assistant to stop him at customs. Sergeant Saunders overhears this and realizes who they're talking about. The mention of Van Diemen sends him into a rage because he served in South Africa and knows all too well that the name belongs to the notorious butcher who ruthlessly killed British soldiers. He storms off towards the docks, determined to confront him. Meanwhile, Van Diemen is at the customs office, and as he waits, his attention is caught by three young girls. He seems lost in thought for a moment before snapping back to the present when a customs officer asks him why he came all the way to New Zealand. Van Diemen coolly responds that he's just curious about why people from New Zealand would travel across the world to help the British destroy his farm. Before the officer can react, Saunders arrives, guns blazing. He confronts Van Diemen, disarms him, and drags him over to Major Carroll. Carroll, seeing what's happened, is furious with Saunders for his reckless actions and demands the return of his weapon. He apologizes to Van Diemen, noting that some people still act as though the war is ongoing. Carroll reminisces about the 2 years he spent hunting Van Diemen in the Transvaal and awkwardly wishes him luck in finding a new farm. Next, the scene shifts to a stable where a Maori man named Kariyama is talking to Lucy, a local prostitute. She's curious about a pouch he wears, which contains soil from his grandfather's land. He tells her that in his culture, she would be seen as a princess and admired for her beauty. Their peaceful interaction is soon interrupted when a drunken Saunders and two corporals stumble out of a bar. They spot the lights on at the stables and decide to go over. Upon seeing Kariyama talking to Lucy, they decide to harass him. Kariyama initially takes the abuse quietly, but as the soldiers push him too far, he lashes out in his native tongue. This only escalates the situation, and the soldiers start attacking him with even more fury. When Lucy tries to intervene, she is roughly shoved aside. The violence grows when Saunders grabs a pitchfork and, in the heat of the moment, accidentally kills one of his own men. In a panic, Saunders spins a false narrative, blaming Kariyama for the death. The remaining corporal backs him up, and Lucy, bruised and intimidated, hesitantly goes along with their story. Major Carroll arrives at the scene, and, though he's suspicious, keeps his thoughts to himself. He sends Saunders and the surviving corporal back to camp, while organizing a search party to find Kariyama. Carroll insists that they won't use dogs, refusing to turn the manhunt into a blood sport. He assigns a local tracker, Bryce, to help lead the search. At the crime scene, Carroll sees Van Diemen and offers him 100 sovereigns for bringing Kariyama in alive, or 25 if he's killed. Van Diemen talks to a local constable and learns that Kariyama is a harpooner who recently left a whaling ship. The next day, the search kicks off along the beach, but Bryce follows the wrong set of tracks, thinking Kariyama is trying to catch another ship. Van Diemen disagrees, believing Kariyama is heading back to his home. He ventures inland alone and soon finds the real trail. By the end of the day, Bryce realizes his mistake, and a soldier grumbles about not having brought dogs, but Carroll insists they return to the point where they lost the trail and try again. Van Diemen continues tracking Kariyama and manages to capture him the following morning. That night, as Van Diemen reads from his Bible, he's surprised when Kariyama finishes the passage from memory. Kariyama explains that he learned it both at a missionary school and from his grandfather, who taught him that to understand your enemy, you must understand their God. Curious, Kariyama asks about the picture Van Diemen keeps in his watch, a photo of his wife and 3 daughters. Van Diemen coldly says that they're gone. The next day, as they cross a river, Kariyama seizes an opportunity to overpower Van Diemen. But when it comes to drowning him, Kariyama hesitates and ends up pulling Van Diemen to safety. Van Diemen regains control of the situation, and the two continue their journey. Their arguments grow more heated. Kariyama is furious that his grandfather failed to protect his people, just as the Boers were defeated by the British. He presses Van Diemen about what happened to his family, which only makes him angrier. Eventually, Van Diemen shares his painful story, how the British burned their farms and forced the women and children into camps where many died from disease. Though he never found out exactly how his family died, the pain of it is still very much alive in him. Their mutual hatred of the British becomes a common thread in their conversations, though Van Diemen insists that he doesn't hold on to hate. He admits, though, that during the Boer War, he and his men would cut off the trigger fingers of captured British officers as a sign of respect, but only for the bravest ones. Kariyama, hearing this, feels a sense of hopelessness. Meanwhile, the search party continues pushing inland, and the terrain becomes more difficult. Carol decides to send one of the soldiers back to camp to bring more supplies. Later, in a quiet moment with a young recruit, Carol shares a piece of wisdom, telling him to live in such a way that he can proudly tell his children what he did for his country. Kariyama manages to escape from Van Diemen again, leading to another intense pursuit. This time, it ends in a brutal confrontation between the two men. Kariyama gains the upper hand and could kill Van Diemen, but he refuses. He insists that he's not a killer. Just then, Bryce shows up with a gun, followed by the rest of the search party. Carol, seeing that Van Diemen helped capture Kariyama, commends him and assures him that he'll receive the promised 100 sovereigns. Soon after, Saunders returns with the much-needed supplies. Carol is not pleased with his arrival and later reprimands him for glaring at Kariyama. He reminds Saunders that this is not about revenge. That night, around the campfire, Van Diemen asks for some meat and takes it to Kariyama, who is still tied to a tree. Van Diemen and Kariyama having a deep conversation about their lives. Van Diemen shares his story about fighting for the cause he believed in during the war in South Africa. On the other hand, Kariyama opens up about witnessing the brutal killing of his grandfather by the British. He was too young to do anything at the time, but he fled, making a vow to return and free his people one day. When Van Diemen asks Kariyama if his goal is to reclaim his family's honor, Kariyama nods, confirming that this is the reason he came back. He tells Van Diemen that he was so close to making it home when Van Diemen intercepted him. The conversation gets deeper as the two continue to open up about their losses, their pain, and their reasons for coming back. As they continue their journey together, Van Diemen leaves his knife behind when he heads back to the camp. Kariyama notices the knife and waits for the perfect moment. He waits until everyone has fallen asleep, then cuts his bonds with the knife. With quiet precision, he knocks out the rookie guard who is supposed to be keeping watch and manages to escape. By the time morning comes, Kariyama is nowhere to be found. Bryce, the tracker, starts to get suspicious, but Van Diemen, knowing Kariyama is on the run, heads out alone, claiming that he has some unfinished business. Saunders, who doesn't fully trust Van Diemen, tells Major Carroll that the rookie's gun is missing, which forces Carroll to give the order to use deadly force if necessary. It's a difficult decision for Carroll, but one he feels he must make. As the group heads out again, they discover the rifle abandoned on the ground. Van Diemen, aware of the situation, deliberately leads the search party on a false trail to buy Kariyama more time. After some time, Van Diemen finds Kariyama near a sacred ancestral cave, a place of great personal importance to Kariyama. Kariyama goes inside the cave, and Van Diemen, instead of chasing him down, sits outside with his Bible open and the picture of his family visible, quietly praying for a moment of peace. When Kariyama returns, they head off together. Now, Van Diemen has taken on the role of protector, looking out for Kariyama as they make their way through the dangerous terrain. Along the way, Kariyama asks again about the trigger fingers that Van Diemen's men would cut off from captured British officers. Van Diemen explains that killing someone was considered a sin, but cutting off the trigger finger of a brave man stopped him from killing again. He tells Kariyama that the act was meant to honor bravery, but it still leaves a deep emotional scar. Realizing that they are being hunted and that escape is no longer an option, Kariyama stops at a waterfall, where Van Diemen urges him to stand and fight. He offers Kariyama a pistol, but Kariyama refuses, stating once more that he is not a killer. As the search party grows closer, Kariyama makes his final request. He asks Van Diemen to shoot him, so he doesn't have to suffer the same fate as his grandfather. Kariyama returns the pistol to Van Diemen, turns his back, and waits for the end. Van Diemen hesitates, but after a moment, he fires. When the search party arrives, they find Van Diemen standing alone by the pool, where Kariyama's body rests beneath the waterfall. In a somber gesture, Van Diemen hands Major Carroll a bloodied bandage containing Kariyama's severed index finger, calling it a final offering to the crown and acknowledging that Kariyama was brave and worthy of respect. Saunders, furious, demands that Kariyama's head be brought to him, but Van Diemen knocks him down with a single punch. Major Carroll, reluctant but firm, prepares to leave the scene. However, Van Diemen insists that the body be carried down and given a proper burial. Carroll, too cold to entertain the idea, refuses, saying, "Too much time has already been spent." Back at base, Carroll is seen watching a man washing himself under a standpipe. The man is scrubbing his head, and something about the way he's acting catches Carroll's attention. It hits him suddenly. Kariyama might still be alive. Carroll immediately orders his men to search every port and whaling station for a Maori man missing his index finger, instructing them to bring him in alive. The tension rises as the film nears its final moments. In the last scene, the focus shifts to a peaceful beach where passengers wait to board a launch bound for Australia. Carroll, on horseback, spots Van Diemen sitting off to the side, away from the others. Carroll dismounts and approaches him, handing him a reward of 25 guineas. He tells Van Diemen that he knows Kariyama survived. In a flashback to the waterfall scene, we see the truth. Van Diemen had deliberately missed his shot. Instead of killing Kariyama, he struck him with his pistol, knocking him into the water. Van Diemen then staged the scene, positioning Kariyama face down and using a knife to fake the aftermath. Back on the beach, Carroll admits that he doesn't fully understand why Van Diemen chose to let Kariyama go, but assumes that Van Diemen had his reasons. Van Diemen accepts the money, acknowledging the generosity, but then pauses. He confronts Carroll, asking if he was the one who ordered his farm to be burned and whether anyone was still inside when it happened. Carroll firmly denies both accusations, and with that, Van Diemen is satisfied. He boards the launch, and Carroll mounts his horse and rides away. The movie then flashes back to the waterfall, where Kariyama regains consciousness. He finds himself alone, yet still free. Meanwhile, in the present, Major Carroll is riding away along the beach, calling out to Van Diemen that all the whaling stations are under watch now, and that Kariyama won't remain free for long. The scene cuts to Kariyama arriving at a whaling station, where a clerk closely observes him as he signs some papers. After a brief moment, the clerk gives a subtle shake of the head to a nearby soldier, signaling for him to do nothing. Kariyama quietly returns the pen and walks out, unnoticed and unharmed. In the final shot, we return to the beach where the launch is pulling away. Carroll gallops down the shoreline, and Van Diemen sits quietly, puffing on his pipe. A bandage covers the stump where his index finger once was. He pulls out his watch case, gazes at the photo of his wife and daughters, and a single tear falls down his cheek. But then, with a gentle smile, he finally feels at peace, free from the burden of his past. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content like this. And hey, if you didn't like it, feel free to hit the dislike button just to make sure. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or any questions you have. I'd love to hear from you. Catch you in the next video.